صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا رسول الله، وعلى آلك المظلومين. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، يا مظلوم يا غريب كربلاء. لعن الله الظالمين لكم، يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before we begin the lecture, can we please recite a Fatiha for our marhameen after salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Yesterday, we spoke about the challenges of the atheists and how to reply to them with only contemplation, without revelation, but with only using our minds. And we discussed the limits of science and why we use the intellect in order to find out if God truly does exist or not. And we began from nothing, from existence itself. And the reason why we spoke about that topic and why we will continue with it today, although it may seem fascinating to some of us here, is many people within the community, unfortunately, we hear about it sometimes every month, sometimes on a weekly basis. I personally know people who went astray from the path by doubting in the Creator, by doubting that there was truly a Lord who has created this universe. And that some of the time, when it comes to Karbala, we have no doubts in Imam Hussain alayhi salam, but we have doubts in the Lord of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. I remember when I was 17 years old, I was in Paris, and till then everything was kind of smooth sailing in terms of the way the world worked. It all made sense. God created us, and I was born a Muslim, and there was not much else to it. And I met a man who challenged my beliefs, and I didn't know how to respond to him. And I came back to London, I remember that year, and I sat in my room for a few days really thinking over what I believed in, and I was shaken. I was truly shaken. And it was sad because most of the things that he said and most of the things that the new atheists of this day and age say, they're not new arguments. They're actually very old arguments, spewed centuries ago. And Muslim scholars hundreds of years ago have responded to all of these arguments. But when it comes to the brothers and sisters who are going through this dilemma, and you ask them, have you read any of the theological books by our scholars that responded to these arguments hundreds of years ago? No. No one's read those books. And it's all old arguments. There's nothing new that they're saying. So it always interests me that so many of these young men and women would sell their faith for such a cheap price, and that yesterday and today's lecture will be based on this topic just so that we can reaffirm to ourselves, not to debate anyone, but when we are challenged, that we have this belief inside us that, hey, it's preposterous to even think that there is a world without God. And for those who were here yesterday, I would venture to say that most of you would agree. When the atheist challenges people of faith, they challenge them with axioms, which is a fancy term which means things that in Arabic we say badihi, things that are just obvious, right? Things that are irrefutable. You can't even debate this fact, for example. And they will say this to you, and you are expected to accept this as an axiom. And I'm telling you now to challenge these axioms. That not everything they tell you that is irrefutable has to be that way. It's not all axiomatic. That the way they challenge some of our beliefs, we can also challenge some of theirs. Now, right now, the reigning theory is the Big Bang theory. And if it does hold, then that dense matter that was in space, that exploded and expanded and keeps expanding infinitely and has always infinitely been there, that's been held as an axiomatic belief. That is just obvious, that you can't refute this. So they'll bring that to you and we don't have to accept that. You don't have to. You can challenge something like that. As in, why has that dense matter always been there? Where did it come from? I mean, we should have the confidence to challenge what they believe to be badihi. Something else is that if the Big Bang theory again does hold, it exploded, right? There was an explosion. And then that's called the Big Bang. And so you wonder, it was all in a stable state before, and then it exploded. So what made it explode? How did it go from a stable state into a Big Bang? I mean, I have nothing against the Big Bang, neither does Islam. But let's say we want to challenge these axioms that they hold, right? Because Islam isn't hurt if the Big Bang theory is proven correct or not. There's nothing in the Quran that is 100% about the Big Bang or not. So if you were to say there was a scale, and there were two weights on the scale, and you left it and you came back, if one of the weights was higher than the other, you would know that something changed. That this one is heavier than this one. You would know this weight is now heavier, right? Something changed. It can't just be stable and then it changes on its own. Or if you saw a swing, it's stable. You left, you came back, now it's moving. You know, it was wind or someone pushed it. Something. It can't just start swinging completely on its own. So we have to challenge these axioms as well. Whenever we are challenged with our beliefs, wait a second, let me challenge yours as well. Have the confidence to do that. Sallallahu alaihi Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Yesterday we spoke about proofs of design, intelligent design. Today we're going to take a bit more of a philosophical approach. It's not a very difficult proof, but there are some terms that I will need you to focus on because they're in Arabic and I'll translate them. Okay, so this is the proof. It's called Dalil al-Imkan, the proof of possibility. And what it does is it talks about existence, right? That there are different levels of existence. Now, if I was to ask anyone here to define existence for me, try to define existence. It's difficult to, okay? Because it's badihi. It's axiomatic. Existence is just there. We just exist. It's difficult to define it. If you want to define non-existence, then you would say non-existence is the concept of something that doesn't exist. But non-existence itself, which means nothingness, nothingness itself doesn't truly exist. You with me? Nothingness doesn't exist. Nothingness Non-existence is a concept to explain something that doesn't exist, but what exists, exists. Okay? So let me explain the different levels of existence. There are 3 different levels of existence. And there are no other levels of existence. You have the impossible existent. And what I mean by the impossible existent, ممتنع الوجود, the impossible existent is something which you can conjure up in your mind, but is not out there in reality. So if you were to right now imagine a mountain of gold, okay, or a mountain of strawberries, you can imagine that in your mind. But is there such thing as a mountain of strawberries? I wish there was, but is there? There aren't mountains of strawberries. That's an impossible existence, but it's possible inside your mind. But in reality, it's an impossible existence. Okay, that's number 1. The second form of existence is the possible existence. ممكن الوجود. It's that which you can conjure up in your mind, but can also exist on the outside, or it can't exist on the outside. So if I was to ask anyone here who isn't married and has no children, can you imagine your son, your future son? You can imagine your future son. Will he exist in the future? Maybe, maybe not. That's a possible existence. Everyone here at one point didn't exist in this world. And now you do. Which means you are also a possible existence. Anything that once did not exist and then came to exist is a possible existence. Okay? It can either exist or it can't exist. So now we have 2 forms of existence. The first one is the impossible existent, what cannot be. The second one is the possible existent, what could, maybe, and what couldn't. The third one, and the final form of existence, is the necessary existence. This form of existence has always been. There's never been a time when it wasn't there. It's necessary. Its existence is intrinsic, an intrinsic value within itself. It's part of its essence. It exists forever. It always has and it always will. It does not need anything to bring it into existence because it's the necessary existence. These are the 3 forms of existence. There aren't any other. If you want to try to think of them, you can. These are the 3. The impossible existent, the possible existent, and the necessary existent. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, sometimes you come across people that they will try to say that, nothing exists. He would tell you that nothing exists. And you can just slap that person and ask them, do you feel pain? How could you feel pain if you don't exist? Actually, I remember one time I was talking to someone. He told me, you can't be sure of anything. Okay, when you really want to speak to certain people and they want to dive deep into philosophy, they will come out with some outrageous statements. And there are philosophers with these conclusions that, for example, you can't be 100% sure of anything. Right? So he would tell me, you can't be sure of anything. And I said, well, are you sure that you're sitting in front of me right now? He'd say, no. Maybe this is just a delusion in some simulated world. And okay, well, are you sure of your statement that you can't be sure of anything? He said, no. I said, I can't speak to you then. You're not even sure of your own statement. Right? So there are going to be a lot of philosophies all over the place. But right now we're sticking to existence has to be there. It's badihi. Or else we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. And we have these 3 forms of existence. Question. Everything that you have ever known to be is mumkin al-wujud. It's a possible existent. Now I ask you the question. Could everything be a possible existent? Remember the qualities of the possible existent. That it has to at one point not exist and then come into existence. Think about it. If everything is a possible existent, can anything truly come into existence? Because it's all dependent. Every possible existent is dependent on something else for its existence. It depends on a cause. So all of us over here right now, we're all possible existence. One point we weren't here, and now we are here. We depended on our parents. They depended on their parents. And it keeps going up and up. It's all possible existence. But if everything is a possible existence, where did it start? Because wherever it started, if it's a possible existence, it also depended on something else. So it didn't start there. It's all logical. Let me give you an example to bring it home. Let's say we were in a race, and I'm not going to start until you start. And you're not going to start until you start. And you're not going to start until you start. And would the race ever actually happen? There would be no race, correct? I'm going to shoot you if you shoot him, if you shoot him, if you shoot him. I don't end up shooting anyone, thankfully. Right? Because this is an infinite regress. It keeps going on, which means nothing ever actually happens. Yet, we are right here. Creation happened. So creation, the race already happened, which is creation. So where did it start? Because if it's all about someone waiting for the other, it's impossible. So we know that we're not an impossible existence, okay, because we're here. We know we're possible existence, but we know that a possible existence cannot come from another possible existence, ultimately. Ultimately, the chain has to break somewhere. And the chain has to break with something that isn't dependent on anything else for its existence. And this is what we call the necessary existent. The necessary existent breaks the chain and starts the creation, starts the causes of the possible existences. This necessary existent is what we call God. This is necessary existent, what we call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But before we get to that, let's just call it the necessary existent. That has to be there for there to be creation. Because we're already here. The race already happened. It already started. And so it has to begin somewhere. And now the atheist would come to you and say, well, what created God? If God created us, what created God, right? And they think this is the, finally we got them. We've got the people of faith. They can never answer this question. It's funny. It's funny. They think this is the golden question. And quite simply, the necessary existence is the one who created space and time. There was no space and time before the necessary existence. It's like they're putting him into the same bracket as the possible existences. He's outside of that. And by the way, this isn't just for people of faith, because we're saying that the necessary existence is infinite. Well, they say, and many scientists believed, until recently when science proved that this was improbable, that the universe was infinite. That the universe never had a beginning. Well, why is it okay for science to say that about the universe, but it's not okay for people of faith to say that about the necessary existent? So it's not something only for the people of faith. Science also say that the universe was infinite until recently, which showed that there must have been a beginning to the universe. And now, if they say that there is a beginning, and they have to say that there is a beginning, then you've got them. You've got them in a very, very logical formula that they cannot escape. Like the logical formula we used yesterday, with two premises. If they're both true, you get the answer. So the first one is, number one, if the universe began to exist, it must have an originator. Sorry, if anything begins to exist, it must have an originator. Anything that begins to exist must have something to bring it into existence. Anything that begins to exist has an originator. The universe began to exist, and so the universe has an originator. That's the premise, right? It's just logical. Number one, anything that begins to exist must have an originator. Number two, the universe began to exist. So number three, the universe must have an originator. This is just a purely logical answer. And if someone wants to say, well, what about God? Well, we say God didn't begin to exist, so it's not part of the first premise. We just said the necessary existent is that which has no beginning. It's the uncaused cause. It's the metaphysical outside time and space. So really the question is, what caused the uncaused cause? And that's contradicting. Because it's the uncaused cause. It cannot be caused. And it's outside the first premise. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When Imam Rida alayhi salam was asked, how do you know that the universe had a beginning? He said that you were not, and then you were. And you know that you did not bring yourself into creation, and someone like you didn't bring you into creation. So there must have been a beginning to it. A necessary existence that brought it forth. And you know, again, an opinion comes forth. Stephen Hawking again, as it was yesterday, we caught him again. He says that no, you can get something from nothing. He says, because we say that you can't get something from nothing. Nothing equals nothing. You can only get something from something. So a possible existence can only come from a necessary existence. But he said no, actually the universe can create itself because of the law of gravity. Because we have a law like gravity, he says, then quantum vacuums, there's quantum fluctuation where the temporary state, different state of energy in empty space, and so the universe creates itself from empty space. And again, you see, because Stephen Hawking is always using science, he made a very silly mistake for someone of his stature. Because empty space, he's mistaking that for nothingness. Empty space still has energy in it. Empty space, electromagnetic waves. Even if there is a fluctuation, it's still something. It's not nothingness, because we said nothingness doesn't exist. Non-existence doesn't exist. Now, if I told you right now, this is all of existence, and what's over here? What's the borderline? What limits existence? What's here? Well, nothing doesn't exist. Right? So there can be no border. So existence is infinite. So existence is infinite, which means existence is one. Which means existence, what does this sound like to you? It's infinite. It's one. Existence is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing except Allah exists. That doesn't mean that you're Allah. It means you are a manifestation. The same way the sun emulates the sun rays. You are those rays. But in truth, the only true existent is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so they come with this joke, right? The biologists on Judgment Day, they meet Allah and they say, God, we have found a way to get rid of you. And he says, oh really? Well, how did you find a way to get rid of me? Well, we found a way how we came into creation without you. He said, okay, show me. He said, well, we bring a little bit of cosmic dust. He goes, wait, get your own cosmic dust. Right? Because where did you bring that cosmic dust from? So it always goes back to something. And that something is the necessary existent. And so just from your mind, right now we're not using revelation, just from your intellect, you can extract so many meanings from this necessary existent. Already you know, because he is necessary, it means he is not dependent on any other cause. This means, if he's not dependent, it means he's ghani. Okay, he's the old wealthy. He's wealthy. Because he doesn't need anything. Okay, now you've given this necessary existent an attribute. We already said he's one. We said infinite. Ghani. What else is there? Well, look at the creation. We have life. That means this necessary existent is alive. Because there's a rule. فَاقِدُ الشَّيْء لَا يَعْطِيهِ. If you don't have something, you can't give it. If I don't have knowledge, I can't give you knowledge. Okay? If I don't have something, I can't give it to you. Likewise, this is a law. You can't give anything that you don't have. If this water was empty, it cannot give water. It cannot quench my thirst. And so, if there is life here, that means whatever gave us life must also have life. And so this wealthy, one, infinite, necessary existent is alive. We have knowledge, it also has knowledge. We have power, it also has power. What relationship do we have with it? Well, we are a creation, which means it's a creator. Okay? And what kind of relationship is it? Is it like the relationship of the builder who builds a building and then leaves it, who brings the material together and then leaves? Or is it more like, again, the sun and the sun rays? As long as the sun is there, the rays are there. If the sun ever moves away or goes absent, the sun rays go absent. It's that type of relationship. And so you think, oh, okay, well, that means he's the nourisher, Rabb. And now you see, we're extracting all these names just from our intellect. And if he is knowledgeable and he's not needy, why would he need to oppress? Because the one who oppresses is either for a need or for ignorance or what have you. Well, he doesn't need to oppress, so he's just. All these names just from intellect. And so then you sit down and you start thinking, wow, okay, this creator with all these names, this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why did you create me? Why did you bring me onto this earth? For what purpose? Say, رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ. You have not created all of this aimlessly. Glory be to you above that. So why did you create me? And we say, because when we are born, every single human being, when they are born with a question. And the question is why? As soon as you reach a certain age and you recognize yourself and you ask, why am I here? What's the purpose? Why? And you are supposed to find out the answer for this why on your life journey. And that's why we're here. And most people don't find out this answer. So you're born in a state of tension, where you're asking why, when you don't know the answer, in a state of tension, and you're supposed to gain the answer so you have a state of peace, and you go back in this state of peace. So, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. It's this journey that we are supposed to go through. But so many people along this journey, they don't want to know, and they numb it. And you know, I don't care what anyone says. If you truly numb yourself to your own purpose, you're going to have a life of anguish. And you can bury the anguish as much as you want. All these people out there, they can bury the anguish as much as they want. And they can bury it under all that material, all those cars, all that money, and those big houses. The anguish is still there. I guarantee you, the anguish is there. You know, Marx, he said religion is the opium of the masses. If you look at realistically in the world, well, opium is the religion of the masses, really. Because everyone's going to drugs, really, to numb themselves. They don't want to know. They numb themselves from the purpose. Right? They've been hurt so much in life, they can't take it anymore. They close their hearts. And so, the same way, when you feel a pain in your body, what does your body tell you? Why is the pain there? Because it tells you, the body is not fulfilling its function right now. There's something wrong, so go to the doctor. And you go to the doctor because that pain told you there's something wrong. Well, the pain that we feel in our souls, likewise, is the same thing. It's telling you something's wrong. The pain in our souls is telling you your soul is not fulfilling its function. There's something wrong. You have to change this. You can't keep numbing it. And you know what? That's what kufr is. Kufr is covering up. You keep covering up. And you can keep covering up as much as you want. And you can delve deep into everything that will numb you from this world, but the anguish of the soul will remain. Because the pain of the soul is there. It's a warning sign to tell you something's wrong. Your life isn't fulfilling its function. So something has to change. And so, brothers and sisters, I think that's a great warning for us, especially on these days and nights where one can truly make a change in their lives. If they feel, and pain doesn't go away just because someone gains closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, in some cases, it's greater. But then that pain is synonymous to the pain of a Karbala'i pain, where I guarantee you, Imam Hussain alayhi salam on Ashura, no one was as happy as the Imam on Ashura day. No one was as happy. When you hear in the majalis that he was confused and he was putting the tent down and walking around, he doesn't know what's going on, That's not true. That's not true. Imam Hussain alayhi salam was a general. He knew exactly what was going on and what they were doing and what they were about to sacrifice. And he did it wholeheartedly. In fact, he couldn't wait. Although, on the outside, he felt all that pain of watching his family be massacred into pieces, inside him, he had a sakina that was unmoved. Because he knew exactly what they were about to sacrifice for. And so, especially now, if we feel the pain on the outside, because of this prison that we live in, these physical bodies and the societies of the godless world that we live in, yet inside us, if we are on the Sirat al-Mustaqim, if you are doing your part, then you will also have that unmoved sakina. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And so, we have focused so much on the mind. And Imam Khomeini, he says that the distance between your mind and your heart is a shibr. This is a shibr in Arabic. Right? The distance is just a shibr. It's this much. But it takes a whole lifetime to travel that distance. So, when you're looking for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we can go with proofs till tomorrow, for the whole week. But really and truly, information, empty information doesn't really matter. If it doesn't really affect your heart and how you feel and your life, if you don't apply that knowledge, it doesn't matter. None of it does. As I said yesterday, an Orientalist can teach you Islamic theology sometimes better than an Islamic scholar can. And so a textbook or the information or philosophical knowledge isn't as important as it seems. What is important though is that your heart feels it. Is that you look for Allah with your heart. And you already do, by the way, you already do. Because everyone in this room loves more. Everyone in this room loves the exact same thing, and we spend every single day going after the exact same thing, which is more. It's always that same thing that we're going after. More, more, more. And we all have more in a different way. Right? It's like an infinite hole inside us, and we're filling it with more. So, I want that degree, I get the degree. I want a master's degree, you get the master's degree. Now I want a PhD, you get the PhD. Now I want a job, you get the job. Now I want to start a family. Well, where do you stop? Now I want a wife, now I want kids, now I want... There's never a point where you actually say, stop, I'm good. Right? There's always another goal that you want to go towards. That's not bad. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying that's what you love. I'm saying that's what you're always doing. All of us do that. But in fact, if you keep trying to fill this infinite hole inside your heart with all these things, with money or family or even a spouse, then because that thing is not infinite, it will always leave you unsatisfied. The only thing that will satisfy your infinite hunger is infinity itself. And there's only one infinity, as we said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so if you love all these things through Allah, satisfaction. But when Allah is empty of it, give me the whole world, you will not be satisfied. You will not be satisfied. And if you sell your soul to this world, selling the soul doesn't have to be like a Jay-Z kind of thing. Selling your soul can be just you, the way you live your life can be selling your soul. And that is a life without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and without satisfaction. And so if I was to ask you, and this is just a proof of your fitrah, if you wanted water, you were thirsty for water, and water didn't exist, what would you say? How can I be thirsty for something that doesn't exist? Well, if you were hungry and there was no such thing as food, how could you be hungry for something that doesn't exist? Well, likewise, how could you spend your entire life in search of the infinite and infinity not exist? The mere fact that you're going after it all your life is a proof of infinity. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الناس أنتم الفقراء إلى الله. O people, you are those in need and poverty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now what does this ayah mean? So much can be said about this ayah. But Mullah Sadra, he comes and he speaks about what he calls al-faqr al-dhati. This essence in poverty and neediness. Where when you within yourself realize how needy you are as a creation, how needy, how you cannot really do anything on your own. When you realize that, when you realize your true poverty, then you will connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in ways that you haven't imagined. When you realize your faqr, first of all, it has two openings. The opening of the mind and the opening of the heart. The opening of the mind, when you realize your faqr, some of us may have experienced this before, when you're in a very dire situation, and then the one thing that comes to your mind now is, oh God, help me please. Right? Like the story of the man of the sinking ship, whose only hope was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or the man on the airplane, for example, the atheist on the airplane, as the airplane's going down, he screams, oh my God. Which God were you shouting to? Right? It's on those moments where you realize your faqr. That's the person just before death realizing their neediness and their poverty. Now, if only that could happen for our lives, usually day by day. That's the mind opening. But what of the opening of the heart? Have you ever watched the baby, truly watched the baby and how it acts? My sister gave birth 2 months ago. And whenever I go to her house, I just watch the baby. Honestly. And I think it's just the perfect slave of God, really, in the way that it acts. It's that whenever my sister's there, it's quiet. As soon as my sister leaves the room, it starts crying. Right? How does it know? Right? Because it knows it has nothing. That my mother, she is the source of my nutrition, the milk, my sleep, my food, my diapers. It's all her. As soon as she leaves, I have nothing. And so I will cry and cry until she returns to me. And when she's with me, I will stop crying. Right? How far do we have to travel to go back to how we were as babies? Because it's a very deep thing. The baby and the mother, that's how we should be with Allah. When you cry and cry until He comes back to you. Because He is the source of your nutrition and your diapers. Right? I mean, really, when you realize that you are so poor, in your poverty, just like the baby, when you have nothing, just like the baby, that is faqr dhati. That is poverty within yourself. You know that now I'm nothing. This is a different level of a relationship with God. And this is the level we should all be aiming for. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And this language of love is encouraged. This relationship of love and language of love with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you look at the munajat of Imam Ali alayhi salam, it's always أنا الذليل, أنا الحقير, أنا المسكين, أنا الصغير, أنا الضعيف, أنت القوي, أنت العظيم, أنت الكبير. It's always you, great, me, small. It's a language of love. And there was a period of time when Nabi Musa alayhi salam, he was shy to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was shy to ask Him for something. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Musa, why don't you ask me? And Nabi Musa alayhi salam, he said, well, Lord, you know what I want. You know what's inside me. You know what I need. I'm shy to say it. See, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Musa, ask me even for the salt of your day, ask me. Just for the salt that you're going to put on your food, ask me for that even. Just so everything that you do, a part of me is with that. Right? There's a level, for example, of praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sure. Then there's a level where you feel I'm shy to even pray to God. Then there's a level where you pray to God because He wants you to. Because He wants to hear you. Sometimes He won't respond straight away because He wants to keep hearing you. Sometimes He might respond straight away to someone else because He doesn't really want to hear them. Right? Because He wants this language of love to develop within you. It's a language of love, and this religion is based on love. It's love of the Creator. So much of the heart has been stripped from it. And you should know that this creed that you have is one based on love. And when you realize in your poverty, that love will only increase. There's a story of the peasant and the king. And the peasant told him, "O king, if there was no more water on the earth, and I only had a cup of water left, would you give me half of your kingdom for this cup of water? The king said, yes, I would. He said, okay. And if you had a disease where you could no longer urinate, would you give half of your kingdom to be able to urinate again? The king said, I would. And so the peasant told him, what kind of kingdom is it that is worth a cup of water and a cup of urine? Right? The whole vast kingdom. But you would give all of that up if you had those two problems. And so it puts into perspective all that we think we have in this world really doesn't amount to much when you truly think about it in the bigger picture of things. And so if we realize this faqr within us, the love will expand, will grow. And no one showed this like Imam Hussain alayhi salam showed this. This language of love was perfected by the Imam in Dua Arafah. And by the way, for 2 nights we've been talking about proving the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know that Imam Hussain alayhi salam, his way is completely the opposite. He flips it on his head. He doesn't even want to do that. He says, Ilahi ruju'i ila al-athar yujibu bu'd al-mazar. My Lord, going back to the effects and the signs. Allah said, go to the effects and the signs and contemplate. And that's what we did yesterday, right? We contemplated upon the creation. But Imam Hussain alayhi salam is saying, if I go back to the effects and the signs, that means there's a veil between you and I. Even the effects is a veil, and I don't want the veil. Bika astadillu alayk. Through you, I prove you. I point to you. I know you. Through you. Right? Direct. Completely different. This is nothing to do with the mind. This is all heart now. This is looking for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the heart only. كيف يستدل عليك من هو بوجوده مفتقر إليك. Look what he says. And he puts me in my place, really. He says, how can he who is needy of you try to prove your existence? He's needy of you for his existence. How's he trying to prove your existence? Right? I'm needy. How can he who is needy trying to prove the necessary? Bika astadillu alayk. It's this beautiful language that the Imam uses. Mata ghibta, mata ba'utta. When did you leave? When were you ever absent for me to try to look for you? You've always been there. I'm the one who went absent. I'm the one who strayed. I'm the one who went far. ماذا فقد من وجدك وماذا الذي وجد من فقدك. Look how beautiful, in what a beautiful way he speaks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What has he found who lost you? And what has he lost who found you? لقد خاب من رضي دونك. He is disappointed whoever was satisfied with other than you. He will be disappointed, guaranteed. And this is the language of love that we must try to develop within ourselves. And even if we can prove Allah's existence through the intellect or philosophy, ultimately it doesn't matter. What we need to do is go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with our hearts. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Brothers and sisters, on these nights, Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam would gather the people in his home. Just like these very majalis we hold for Imam Al-Hussain, he would also hold these majalis. He would invite people from all walks of life. The Christian figures, the Sunni figures, he would invite them all to his home. He would bring a poet and he would ask the poet, recite for me the story of Hussain. The poet would begin, I passed by the corpse of Hussain, and I say to the sacred crushed bones, tell me the story of your pain. Imam As-Sadiq begins to cry. He tells him to continue. Don't stop reciting for Abu Abdullah. The poet goes on. He calls out, Ya Fatima, if you had seen your son by the riverbed with his head off of his body, cut into pieces, you would lament upon your cheeks for Abdullah. They bring a baby to Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam. He sits in the middle of the room with the baby in his hands. He begins to hold the baby up. He shows the baby around to everyone in the room. Ya Nas, a baby just like this was slaughtered in Karbala when the arrow reached its neck and it reached out for its father, and the blood began to squirt out, and it flapped its arms like a slaughtered bird. The Imams of the Ahlul Bayt would always remember Abu Abdullah in majalis just like these. Abu Hamza al-Thumali walked into Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam as he watched the Imam crying, still remembering Karbala after all these years. He says, Ya Imam, isn't martyrdom normal for you and your family? Imam Zain al-Abidin replies, Ya Abu Hamza, martyrdom to us is normal, but is it normal for people to take our women as captives? Is it normal for them to burn the tents? Is it normal for them to chain our children? He says, Ya Imam As-Sajjad, there is a woman outside, sitting down in the middle of the sun, putting sand on her head. Who is she? Is she a maid? Is she a servant? Why don't you tell her to come inside? He says, Ya Abu Hamza, this woman is not a normal woman. This woman is Rabah, the mother of Ali al-Asghar. She swore never to be again in the shade after Karbala. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. لعن الله القوم الظالمين. إلى يوم القيامة. صلى الله على محمد وآل محمد.